Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video. Reminder, if you want a lesson with me, the disembodied hand, check out the link in the description below. Our video today is going to be about construction of slides. So you think you might know slides, but we're just going to go over kind of like the basics of all the parts, and then some changes in how slides are built by different companies, and even the same company in different ways. So my first slide here today, to be an example of kind of the basic names for everything of all the parts, is a Bach 36 slide. You may be able to see model 36 right here. This is my one that I have that's been widened to Bach 42 width. So otherwise, completely stock, almost. And it's just widened. And we're just going to go over all the names of the different bits of the trombone. So starting at the top, bloop, we have the mouthpiece receiver. Obviously, this is where, reach over, grab a random mouthpiece. This is where the mouthpiece goes in. Duh, we know that part, right? We'll get into the inside of that in a bit. We got the brace socket here, which is brazed onto this. This is the cork barrel, so called because, well, it looks like a barrel, and then it has the cork, or now we use felts, that stop the slide from just banging metal on metal. You can see that the cork barrel goes over part of the slide right here. Otherwise, this would just be exposed. Inner slide, you would just have like a grip here, and then just inner slide. You wouldn't be able to hold it because it would just be inner slide, and you would like go over your hand, right? Got our slide lock, slides over the thing here. We got our second brace. We got two braces here. These, I think some people might mistake this, but these braces are obviously hollow. They're not just solid rods of brass. On this trombone, these parts are all nickel. You can see there's the silver-ish color. It doesn't look the same as silver plate. We'll talk about that later. These are all nickel parts. We have an oversleeve right here that stops here. This is the short one, long one on the bottom. We've got a tube at the end. Whoa, way down here we have a crook. This is a brass crook. You can see it's been buffed right here, so it's shinier. Connected with a ferrule, brass crook, spit valve, blah, blah, blah. Tube. We've got the long oversleeve on the lower tube, typical of Bach's. The lower cork barrel. The other side, I actually don't know what this exact part is called. Something in the hand slide assembly, obviously. And then the slide tenon that goes into your trombone. So we already kind of knew the basics of the outside, probably. I mean, you hold it here and you move this part. Cool, we know that much, and you empty the spit valve down there. But what do these things mean? Like, what happens if you change the oversleeves? What happens inside? What's going on with the tubes? Why are they this shiny color? Let's talk about that part next. So we have two tubes here, right? One is this length, it stops here. One is this length, it stops here. Yes, the slide tube goes all the way to the end of the tenon right here. And they go all the way to the bottom. We'll show the ends of them in a second. But they are just tubes. There's no taper. There's nothing crazy about them. We'll talk about the stockings down at the end in a moment too. But these, they have no taper, right? But we need to be able to put a mouthpiece in the slide. If you have no taper, a mouthpiece that has a taper, you can see the angles on it right there. A mouthpiece is just going to either get stuck forever or it's going to fall out. So we need some kind of receiver area, which is going to be the first little part of a lead pipe. Ta-da! Lead pipes are a not exactly like modern thing, but they are a little more modern than the trombone. Sack butts do not have lead pipes, for instance. And German instruments didn't have lead pipes for a long time, longer than American trombones. Basically, you have a slide tube, and then inside this slide tube for the first, about this length, this is just a Bach 50 lead pipe I have sitting around, there is a pipe much like this that has what's called a venturi. So it's got a receiver portion at the beginning here, and then what it's going to do is it's going to narrow at some point and then broaden out again to the same size as the bore of the inner slide. Now, this all sounds very complicated, but basically the point is you need something like this in order for the slide to play well and give you resistance. Hey, cat. If you don't have a lead pipe like this, it is very difficult to play because there's basically no resistance except for the small throat of the mouthpiece. Small. depending on the mouthpiece, of course, and of course your chops. Hey, cat. So almost all modern trombones, hey cat, have a lead pipe of some sort in the beginning of the slide. Now, you can probably see it if you look in the end of the instrument. You can see the inner slide itself, and then you can see a smaller tube that's soldered in. That's the lead pipe. And also, usually, if you like shine a flashlight down, maybe from the other end, you can see the end of the lead pipe, just a little tiny little lip of the lead pipe sticking in the inner slide. Most lead pipes, like on this instrument, are soldered in. They won't have a ring like this. It'll just be kind of part of the instrument. It's something you can remove if you have a torch and like some time and some expertise, but you won't be able to just take it out on your own. On most boutique instruments, however, we have removable lead pipes. Oh, it's very hard to move this one, but I have it unscrewed, you can see here, and I have it pulled out just a little bit to show that, and I can barely do this with my fingers. This is really quite a tight fit in this slide. There we go, most of the way in, and then it'll screw the rest of the way in. And that just means that I can take this lead pipe out and try another one like the one that I just showed you in the slide for a different way for this to blow and sound and stuff. So now we have the inner slide tubes. I've taken the outer slide off, and you can see down here at the end we have this kind of like little lip, and then the end of the slide. This is, of course, the stocking of the slide, of the inner slide. Without a stocking, without this slightly larger point where this raises up, and you can feel it if you run your finger over it, without that larger point on the slide won't seal. It'll just be one size tube inside of another size tube, and there won't be a point where they actually seal. You don't want it all to be the same size, or else it'll have kind of crappy action. But you do need this portion to be raised just a little bit larger diameter to fit inside the outer slide. Really quick, you can see how the cork barrels are kind of free floating over the inner slide tubes here, because they are secured to the hand slide assembly up here at the top. The inner slide basically is just free floating all the way up until here, and basically the inner slide tubes are connected, soldered into the exterior parts here throughout that whole section. So all of the inner slide is held together by these parts. It's very important that, and there's a reason this is here, that all this stuff remains nice and soldered and in good alignment, or else your slide sucks. So again, stockings are really important, and if you ever look at a used trombone, or check one out or whatever, take the outer slide off and check the stockings, especially the ends, for signs of wear. I actually have a slide that I'll show right now that does have wear on the stockings. So here's one of my slides. It's kind of gross right now. I actually just cleaned it, and I just put Yamaha stuff on it, and this is the stuff coming off of the outer slide and kind of coating the inner slide. But you can see right here, that little pinhole, it's not a pinhole, it's just a spot where the chrome plating, which is what's on this, has worn through, and the under material is showing through. And most slides are nickel. The inner slide is a nickel tube. Some of them are brass. I'm pretty sure these are going to be nickel inner slide tubes. But in any case, you want that chrome plating to be complete. You don't want holes or gaps like this. For me, this is a slide I'll show you in a moment, and it actually has pretty good action right now. You just can't rely on it being good forever. So we've flipped around that first slide again, and now we've got it the other way around. The beginning of the slide's over here, and now we have the crook. The outer slide tube comes down here, and we have a ferrule that connects two tubes about the same size. And then I have this Shire's 525 crook on here that's not stock, and we have a little bow guard on here, plus the usual floor peg kind of thing, crook, blah blah blah. Lots of cool different things about crooks. This one is just a yellow brass crook. Nothing special about it. It's the same bore as the slide, so it's very standard. Nothing cool about that really. And we have a normal water key or a spit valve setup. I don't have any cool water keys, so I won't be able to show you any of that kind of cool stuff. And of course, when I flipped it around again, we come back up. Here's the lower tube this time with the longer oversleeve. You can see that these oversleeves on this slide extend all the way up until the end of the slide. So we have a long nickel oversleeve here. That's not long, that's a short one. Then we have a long one on the bottom tube. Basically, it's kind of standard to have some kind of oversleeve over the actual outer tubes. Bach likes to do short on top, long on bottom. We'll see some other variations here in 1 second. So here's a slide you might not have expected. The King 3B has oversleeves. You can just barely see the gap right here. Nickel oversleeves on a nickel slide. This has gold colored lacquer on it, of course, so it doesn't look like it's nickel, but it is. And they're both the same length, and they're both, I'd say, medium length. Not short, not long, and they're both the same length. They stop in the same place. But you can see that little lip where the oversleeve is. Some people like to take oversleeves off because they're a separate part from the outer slide, and that'll make your slide lighter, make it respond different, play differently, maybe sound a little bit different. I personally like having oversleeves because it gives the slide a little more solid feel in the hand and a bit better blow that I like. We'll see this slide in a moment as well, later I should say, but you can see I've removed the lead pipe and it has a lead pipe in here with a ring, but I've had the lead pipe soldered in so it cannot come back out again. Here's a big boy slide. This is my contra slide. We got two, and again, I think these are medium length oversleeves. They're longer than all my other horns, but this is also a big slide. What's cool about this is, of course, this is German manufacture from like the 60s, so we have really cool fittings for like the braces and stuff. You can see a hole here where there used to be a plunger style water key, and now is just a normal one. And I have two of the first handguard brace because this is a big slide, and I think they thought they needed two. Different cork barrels, and this has no slide lock at all, and it has an added removable lead pipe. Interestingly, this does not have a tapered slide tenon like every other slide on the planet. It's just a cylinder part. Like I said, some slides just don't have oversleeves. This is a Bach LT slide. That means it's all nickel, including the crook. We'll talk about crooks here in a moment. And it just doesn't have oversleeves. It's got these little kind of like gusset ferrule things that are on the ends just to make sure that it's not sharp, you know, and there's like a serial number on here. But there's just nothing there. So the whole slide is lighter. It does make it a little more, you have to worry about it a little more if you start to wear through a tube. You're just going to go straight through the tube instead of through the outer, through the oversleeve first. So that's just something you have to worry about. And it does change how the slide feels in the hand just a little bit. So let's talk about materials. So materials are a cool thing, right? We have a whole bunch of different materials that can make up an instrument. We've got yellow brass, we've got red brass, we've got rose brass, which is kind of gold brass. We have gold brass. We have nickel silver, which is kind of stuff you see right here. We have a whole bunch of different things that you can put together, and they can all be in slides too. Most makers like to use nickel parts for the hand grip assemblies of their professional models. Most student models will use brass parts here instead. Sometimes they'll be chrome plated. A lot of times they'll just be brass with lacquer on them. In any case, this has nickel parts here. It's got nickel oversleeves. They're both kind of medium length, and they're both the same length, which is different than the box stuff. You can see this has a totally different right hand brace than any of the ones we've seen. It's just one tube. There's no separate socket with a tube in the middle. It's just one tube. You better hope you get the length of this one correct when you put the slide together, or you're going to have a real problem. This is a little more adjustable. We got these, and then we have rose outers. So instead of the yellow brass we've seen, or maybe nickel, we have rose outers. And in the end, a yellow brass crook. Just a little bit different. And actually, strangely enough, I have 3 slides like this at the moment. My Holton 185 slide has nickel parts for all of this stuff, of course, but Holton has to be weird. They're just like this, and all of their hand grip assemblies are fully chrome plated. Chrome plating is very difficult and like very environmentally hazardous, and so basically the only chrome plated stuff you see these days is the inner slide tubes that we just saw. This is actually the one that has the holes in these chrome plating on the inner slide. But in any case, Holton liked to chrome plate their hand slide stuff, whatever. And then we got some shortish oversleeves, same length, kind of a normal hand brace, nickel tubes, and then weirdly again a brass crook. Just a couple of dings in that. So almost all nickel with a brass crook. Probably a good way to kind of balance it out. All nickel can be its own monster. So we looked at this already. This is my LT16M slide. LT meaning all nickel, lightweight. There's no oversleeves, and we have a nickel crook on the end. Now the next slide is going to be confusing because it looks very similar to this. Oh, would you look at that? It's a box slide. It's got no oversleeves. You can see there's no bump right here, and it's nickel silver colored, right? Actually, this is a Bach 12 slide that is stock, except that the oversleeves have been removed. So this looks nickel silver, but this is actually silver plating over brass. And this is brass outers, brass crook, nickel silver, all this stuff, because that is on all Bachs. So it looks just like my LT slide, but is different in almost every way, except that there's no oversleeves on both. Someone had the oversleeves removed. You might even be able to see where they were. Sometimes you can. I guess you can't on this. But you can tell usually because the right hand brace will look a little janky because they had to take it off, expand it just a little bit to make up for the lack of oversleeves, and then put it back on. Here's a German slide again, my F-Contra slide. We got nickel, brass tubes. Right? These are brass? Yes, these are just yellow brass tubes. I always have to remember. And then a nickel crook. So this actually is a very American slide. There's tons of American slides out here just like this in basically no way, except for the materials used. Just the normal nickel stuff, nickel oversleeves, yellow brass tubes, and a nickel crook. Like I said, yellow tubes and a nickel crook is almost the most popular kind of slide out there right now, at least in the orchestral world. This is my Bach dual bore slide. You can see you got short and long oversleeves, much like a Bach slide. We got yellow tubes and a nickel crook. But wait, I said dual bore. What does that mean? So every one of these other slides I have, because I only have one of these, has the same size inner and outer tubes on both of these. So it's the same, we'll say, 525 through the inner bore, of course, 525, and then 525 all the way to here. So it's the same exact cylindrical bore the entire way through here, except for the lead pipe, which is going to get a little bit smaller, then come back up to 525. This slide, however, is dual bore, so it's 562, blah, 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 562. We've got a bass crook on here, which is 578. Oh man, I have to think about that. Yeah, 578. And then 578. This tube is bigger than the top tube. That basically just gives us a bit more of a conical feel instead of the usual super cylindrical feel of the trombone by starting with a smaller bore and going to a bigger one. Instead of all the way over here at the bell section, we're going to do it halfway through the slide. In bass trombone terms, simple enough. Makes for a bigger sound, bigger articulations, bit easier low range, stuff like that. It's a very bass trombone thing. Just because I don't have any for other instruments, though, there's plenty of small bores, the King 2B, for instance, the Bach 16, and there's dual bore slides for plenty of tenor trombones as well. Now we have an oddball. We got chrome-plated grip. I didn't even think I had two of those right now. We have brass parts for the right hand. We got brass tubes, brass crook, whoa, and tuning and slide. So I've talked about this before in other videos. Basically, instead of the bell section having a tuning slide, it's just one piece, maybe a couple pieces that are put together permanently. And this instead moves of its own accord. And basically we have another set of tubes. Let's see if I can push this apart. There we go. We have another set of tubes that this one will socket into that goes over the inner slide. You can see it's all separate here. And that just gives us more length on the slide. And of course, if you push this all the way out, then when you are in first position, then there's just going to be a bunch of slide like hanging over the end of the inner slide. You know, not really a problem. This is just a different way to set up a bell section. Some people like the way that tuning and slide instruments work. And one reason, I think, is that there's a bunch of weight on the slide, which I think is usually a good thing. Response-wise, I like that. But also, it does make the slide heavier, less fun to move. And yes, this is from a Warrell alto trombone, the one that I'm borrowing, and I almost never play. So that's a bit of a bewildering amount of information, right? We've gone over all these different things. Materials, we got nickel, silver, and brass. This is my stock 36 slide again. We got crooks. All these things can be different, right? Well, don't worry about it too much. These little things do make little differences. Lead pipes probably make the biggest difference, but even those, I wouldn't worry about it too much unless you're really getting nitpicky about equipment differences. It's just fun to know that there's different way to set up slides. I do notice a big difference between, say, this and my friend's 36 slide, which is not widened. Just that crook makes a big difference all by itself. My bass slides are different materials, but they're also different bores. They play quite differently to me. And just, just try things out. But I think it's fun to at least know that slides are an interesting thing in themselves, and there's lots of parts and thought that goes into construction of all of it. I'll see you guys next time.